My in-laws pressured me to buy my jobless sister-in-law a car, but when I uncovered her secret schemes, I exposed her and shattered her whole life. I never thought saying no to buying a car could turn my entire in-law family into my I never thought that refusing to buy someone a car could transform my entire husband's family into my sworn enemies, but here I am 6 months later and honestly, I'm not even sorry about the chaos that followed. Let me back up and introduce myself properly. My name is Madison Brooks, I'm 30 years old, and I've been working as a senior accountant at Henderson & Associates, a mid-sized private financial firm downtown, for the past 5 years. I've always prided myself on being responsible with money. It's literally my job. But somehow over the course of 2 years, I'd become the personal ATM for my sister-in-law without even realizing how deep I'd fallen into the trap. Tiffany, my husband's 25-year-old sister, had been living with us completely rent-free in our spare bedroom since what was supposed to be a temporary setback. She'd lost her job at a retail store and claimed she just needed a few weeks to get back on her feet. Those few weeks turned into months, which somehow morphed into 2 full years of what I can only describe as financial parasitism disguised as family support. Looking back now, I can see exactly how it happened, how slowly and methodically I was manipulated into becoming her personal funding source. It always started small and seemingly reasonable. $20 here for gas money, $50 there for groceries when she was waiting for her unemployment check. But gradually, almost imperceptibly, the requests escalated into territory that should have set off every alarm bell in my financially trained brain. Designer clothes became a necessity because she needed to look professional for job interviews. Expensive makeup was essential for her confidence and self-esteem. Nights out with friends were justified as networking opportunities that might lead to employment. Every single time I felt that little voice in my head questioning whether this was appropriate, she'd deploy those devastating puppy dog eyes and deliver some variation of the same emotional manipulation. Madison, you're like the sister I never had. I honestly don't know what I'd do without you. You've been my lifeline through all of this. And like a complete fool, I'd cave every single time, reaching for my wallet while silencing that increasingly loud voice of reason in my head. Mark, bless his heart, genuinely believed I was just being generous and supportive toward his sister. And to be fair, I was trying to be exactly that. But what my husband couldn't see from his perspective, or maybe chose not to see, was how dramatically Tiffany's behavior had shifted from grateful temporary houseguest to utterly entitled permanent resident who acted like our home was her personal resort. Her daily routine had become absolutely maddening to watch. She'd roll out of bed sometime around noon, usually just as I was taking my lunch break from working at home, looking perfectly refreshed while I'd already been grinding through spreadsheets and client calls for 4 hours. The rest of her day consisted entirely of endless scrolling through social media platforms, binge-watching Netflix series, and occasionally rearranging her ever-growing collection of clothes and accessories in what used to be our guest room, but had essentially become her permanent bedroom suite. Whenever I'd carefully, diplomatically suggest that maybe it was time to start actively job hunting again, she'd instantly have a perfectly rehearsed excuse ready to deploy. Madison, you don't understand how terrible the job market is right now, she'd say with this exasperated sigh, as if I were completely naive about economic realities. Or she'd claim, I'm still waiting to hear back from this absolutely amazing opportunity that could really change everything for me, though she could never provide specifics about what this mysterious opportunity actually entailed. Meanwhile, the brutal irony of the situation was that I was pulling 50-hour work weeks, sometimes staying up until midnight to finish client reports, essentially supporting not just Mark and myself, but a fully grown 25-year-old woman who had transformed our spare bedroom into her personal kingdom and treated our household like her private bed and breakfast where everything was included and nothing was expected in return. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning in March. I was getting ready for work when Tiffany bounced into the kitchen wearing a brand new outfit that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. She poured herself coffee and sat down across from me with this excited expression. Madison, I have the most amazing news, she said, practically vibrating with enthusiasm. I found the perfect job, but there's just one tiny problem. I should have known right then that this wasn't going to end well, but I was still operating under the delusion that maybe, just maybe, she was finally ready to become independent. What kind of problem? I asked, already dreading the answer. Well, it's about 15 miles from here, and you know how unreliable Uber can be. I really need my own transportation to make this work. She paused dramatically, then hit me with it. I need a car, Madison. Nothing fancy, just something reliable to get me to and from work. The way she said it, so casual and expectant, like she was asking me to pass the salt instead of drop $15,000 to $20,000 on a vehicle for someone who hadn't contributed a single penny to our household expenses in 2 years. Tiffany, I said carefully, buying a car is a huge financial commitment. Have you looked into other options? Maybe public transportation or carpooling, or even a used bike to start with? Her face fell immediately, and I could see the storm brewing behind her eyes. Madison, I can't show up to a professional job on a bicycle. That's not realistic. And public transportation would take hours each way. I thought you'd be happy that I found work. I am happy about the job, I said, trying to keep my voice level. But Mark and I have our own financial goals and responsibilities. We can't just buy you a car. That's when she dropped the manipulation bomb. I thought you cared about me. I thought I was family to you. But I guess I was wrong. She dramatically stormed out of the kitchen like some wronged heroine from a soap opera, and I knew immediately that I was about to face the full wrath of the Brooks family communication network. Sure enough, within 60 minutes my phone transformed into a weapon of emotional warfare that wouldn't stop buzzing with incoming attacks. The assault began with Mark calling from his office, his voice strained with confusion and concern. Madison, what happened this morning? Tiffany just called me in tears saying you basically told her you don't want her to succeed in life. She's completely devastated and saying you've always resented her being here. I could hear the hurt in his voice, the way he was already being pulled between loyalty to his wife and his ingrained need to protect his little sister. Before I could even process that conversation fully, my phone lit up again with his mother Janet's number. This time there was no confusion, just pure maternal fury. Madison Brooks, she said in that icy tone that could freeze hell over. I want to know exactly why you think it's acceptable to be so incredibly selfish when my daughter has finally found her path forward. After everything this family has done for you, this is how you repay us? The barrage didn't stop there. By the time my lunch break rolled around, I was staring at 3 missed calls from Mark's father, Robert, each one probably more heated than the last, plus a text message so long it required multiple screens to read completely. The message was a masterpiece of guilt manipulation, weaving together themes about family obligations, Christian values, supporting those in need, and how disappointed he was in my heartless attitude towards someone who just needs a helping hand to get back on track. I felt like I was under siege in my own home, facing a coordinated attack from people who had somehow twisted my reasonable financial boundaries into evidence of moral failure. I felt like I was going insane. Here I was, being painted as the villain for not wanting to buy a car for an adult woman who had been freeloading off me for 2 years. But the pressure was intense, and it was coming from every direction. That evening, Mark came home with this defeated expression and sat me down for what he called a serious conversation. Madison, I love you, but my family thinks you're being unreasonable about the car situation. Tiffany is really trying to get her life together, and this job could be the breakthrough she needs. Mark, I said, trying to stay calm, we've been supporting your sister for 2 years. We pay for her food, her housing, her utilities, her phone bill, and most of her personal expenses. Now she wants us to buy her a car. Where does it end? It ends when she gets back on her feet, he said. But even he didn't sound convinced anymore. That night I couldn't sleep. Something about the whole situation felt wrong, beyond just the financial aspect. So I did something I probably should have done months earlier. I started paying attention to what Tiffany was actually doing with her days. The next morning, after Mark left for work, I told my boss I was working from home and decided to do a little investigating. I watched from my home office window as Tiffany left the house around 10 a.m., dressed to the nines and carrying a designer purse I definitely hadn't bought for her. She was gone for about 4 hours, then came back with shopping bags from expensive stores. This went on for 3 days. No job interviews, no work-related activities, just shopping trips and long lunches with friends. When I casually asked her about her job search, she gave me vague answers about waiting to hear back and interviewing with several places. I was starting to realize that I'd been played, and played hard. The final straw came when I decided to check our joint credit card statements more carefully. What I found made my blood run cold. Over the past 6 months, there had been hundreds of small charges I'd never noticed before. Coffee shops, retail stores, online subscriptions, even cash advances. All adding up to nearly $3,000 that I hadn't authorized. But the worst part wasn't the money, it was what I found when I called the credit card company to report the unauthorized charges. Tiffany had somehow gotten herself added as an authorized user on our account, probably by using personal information she'd gleaned from living in our house. She'd been essentially stealing from us for months, and I'd been too trusting to notice. I was shaking with rage, but I forced myself to think strategically. I needed more evidence before I confronted anyone, because I knew the family would circle the wagons around Tiffany no matter what I said. I spent the next week quietly gathering documentation. Screenshots of the credit card charges, photos of her expensive purchases, even a timeline of her supposed job search activities. I also did something that felt like a violation of privacy but seemed necessary under the circumstances. I checked her social media accounts. What I found there was infuriating. Photos of expensive dinners with captions like treating myself, designer outfits with tags like retail therapy, and posts about how blessed she was to have family who supported her dreams. There was even a photo of her at a spa day with friends, captioned, "Unemployed life isn't so bad when you have an amazing support system." She was literally bragging online about living off us while playing the victim to our faces. I was ready to confront her immediately, but fate had other plans. That Friday afternoon, I got a call from Mark that made my blood pressure spike to dangerous levels. "Madison, my parents are driving down this weekend. They want to have a family meeting about the Tiffany situation." "A family meeting?" I repeated, already knowing I wasn't going to like where this was heading. "They think we need to have a serious conversation about supporting family and what that means. They're pretty upset about how you've been treating Tiffany." I wanted to scream. Instead, I said very calmly, "Mark, tell me something. When was the last time you actually looked at our credit card statements?" There was a pause. "What do you mean? Just answer the question. When was the last time you reviewed our monthly charges?" "I don't know, Madison, you handle all that stuff." "Why?" "Maybe you should start paying attention," I said, and hung up. That weekend was going to be interesting, and I was going to make sure it was memorable for all the right reasons. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzly, matching my mood perfectly. Mark's parents pulled into our driveway at exactly 9 a.m. in their massive SUV, followed immediately by Tiffany in an Uber. The fact that she took an Uber instead of riding with her parents should have been my first clue that this whole thing had been carefully orchestrated. They'd driven 1,200 miles from Kansas just to have this conversation. 1,200 miles to come to my house and tell me I needed to buy their daughter a car. Mark was nervous, I could tell. He kept running his hands through his hair and suggesting we all have coffee before we got into anything serious, but his mother, Janet, was having none of it. "Madison," she said the moment she walked through our front door, "we need to talk about your attitude toward family. Not hello, not how are you, not even a basic acknowledgement that she was a guest in my home. Just straight into attack mode." "Good morning, Janet," I said pleasantly. "Would you like some coffee?" "Don't deflect," she snapped. "We drove all this way because Tiffany called us in tears, saying you refused to help her get a job." I looked at Tiffany, who was sitting on our couch looking like butter wouldn't melt in her mouth, and felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. "I didn't refuse to help her get a job," I said calmly. "I refused to buy her a car." Mark's father, Robert, jumped in with his booming voice. "Same difference. How is she supposed to work without transportation? You and Mark have good jobs, you can afford it. This is about family taking care of family." "You're right," I said, and I saw Tiffany's face light up with premature victory. "This is about family. So let's talk about family." I walked over to my laptop bag and pulled out a folder I'd prepared. Since we're having a family meeting, I thought everyone should see what our family finances actually look like. Mark looked confused. His parents looked annoyed. Tiffany looked like she was about to throw up. "Over the past 2 years," I continued, spreading papers across our coffee table, "we've spent approximately $43,000 supporting Tiffany. That includes housing, food, utilities, clothing, entertainment, and miscellaneous expenses." Janet waved her hand dismissively. "That's what family does." "You're absolutely right," I agreed, "but here's what family doesn't do." I pulled out the credit card statements, highlighted and annotated. Family doesn't steal. Family doesn't commit fraud, and family doesn't lie about it for months." The room went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. "What are you talking about?" Robert demanded. I looked directly at Tiffany, whose face had gone pale. "Would you like to explain to your family how you got yourself added as an authorized user on our credit card without our knowledge? Or should I?" "I didn't," Tiffany started, but her voice cracked. $3,000 in unauthorized charges over 6 months. I continued relentlessly. Coffee shops, retail stores, cash advances, online subscriptions. All using a credit card that you were never given permission to use. Mark's jaw dropped. "Tiffany, is this true?" Instead of answering, Tiffany burst into tears. But these weren't guilty tears, these were angry, manipulative tears. "I can't believe you're accusing me of stealing," she sobbed. "I thought you loved me. I thought I was part of this family." "You are part of this family," Janet said fiercely, glaring at me. "Madison, I can't believe you're making these accusations without proof." That's when I pulled out my phone and opened Tiffany's Instagram account. "You want proof? Here's your daughter posting about her unemployed life and her amazing support system while she's supposed to be desperately job hunting." I showed them post after post of expensive meals, shopping trips, spa days, and nights out with friends. All while she was crying poverty to us and begging for money. "This is from last Tuesday," I said, showing them a photo of Tiffany at an expensive restaurant. The same day she told me she couldn't afford to buy groceries and needed $60 for food. Mark was staring at his sister like he'd never seen her before. "Tiffany, what the hell? You don't understand," she whined. "I've been so stressed about finding work. I needed those things to help me cope." "You needed a $100 facial to cope with unemployment?" I asked incredulously. Robert was starting to look uncomfortable, but Janet was doubling down. "Even if she made some mistakes, that doesn't mean you should abandon her. She needs help getting back on track, not judgment." That's when I lost it. 2 years of frustration, manipulation, and financial abuse came pouring out of me. "Abandon her?" I said, my voice rising. "I've been supporting a grown woman for 2 years. I've paid for her food, her housing, her clothes, her entertainment, her phone bill, and apparently her secret shopping addiction. I've been working 50-hour weeks to pay for someone else's lifestyle while she lies to my face about looking for work." "Madison, calm down," Mark said, but I was way past calm. "No, Mark, I will not calm down. Your family drove 1,200 miles to come to my house and tell me I'm selfish for not buying your sister a car, while she's been literally stealing from us for months. I'm done pretending this is normal." "She's not stealing," Janet protested. "She's family. She's a thief," I said flatly. "And if she were anyone else, I would have called the police months ago." The room erupted. Janet started yelling about my heartless attitude. Robert was demanding I apologize to Tiffany. Mark was trying to play peacemaker, and Tiffany was sobbing dramatically about how misunderstood she was. But I was done with all of it. Completely, utterly done. "Everyone needs to leave," I said, my voice cutting through the chaos. "Right now." "What?" Mark looked shocked. "You heard me. Everyone out. This is my house, and I'm not listening to another word of this insanity." "Madison, these are my parents," Mark protested. "And this is my home," I replied. "Tiffany, you have 1 hour to pack your things and get out. Permanently." The tears stopped immediately. "You can't kick me out. I have nowhere to go." "You should have thought of that before you decided to steal from me," I said coldly. Janet stood up, her face red with fury. "If you kick Tiffany out, you're destroying this family." "No," I said, meeting her glare with perfect calm. "I'm saving it." What happened next was the most satisfying hour of my entire life. While Tiffany packed her things and complained loudly about how unfair everything was, I called our credit card company and had her removed as an authorized user. I also called our bank and put a fraud alert on all our accounts. Mark's parents spent the entire time trying to convince me to change my mind, but I was done negotiating. Every time they started a new argument, I'd pull out another piece of evidence from my folder. The credit card charges, the social media posts, the timeline of lies about job searching. "She's been playing all of us," I told Mark quietly, while his parents were outside loading Tiffany's belongings into their SUV. "For 2 years, she's been living a double life, crying poverty to us while bragging about her lifestyle online." Mark looked defeated. "I can't believe she would do this. She's my little sister." "Your little sister is 25 years old and a con artist," I said gently. And if we kept enabling her, she'd never have learned to stand on her own feet. My parents are furious, he said. Your parents drove 1,200 miles to pressure me into buying a car for someone who's been stealing from us. Maybe they should direct their anger toward the person who actually caused this situation. When the SUV finally pulled out of our driveway, I felt like I could breathe for the first time in months. The house was quiet, clean, and ours again. Mark was sulking, but I could tell part of him was relieved too. What happens now? He asked. Now we change all our passwords, monitor our credit reports, and learn to say no when people try to take advantage of our generosity, I said. Over the next few weeks, the fallout was intense. Mark's parents called daily, alternating between guilt trips and outright hostility. They couldn't understand why I wouldn't forgive and forget for the sake of family unity. Mark's siblings, who had previously stayed out of the drama, started taking sides. But the most telling reaction came from Tiffany herself. Instead of apologizing or showing any remorse, she launched a social media campaign, painting herself as the victim of my jealousy and controlling behavior. According to her posts, I had kicked her out because I was threatened by her youth and beauty, not because she had been stealing from us. The lies were so outrageous that they actually worked in my favor. Anyone who knew me could see through her manipulative narrative, and several mutual friends reached out to ask if I was okay and if there was anything they could do to help. More importantly, Mark finally saw his sister for who she really was. When she posted a particularly vicious attack on me, calling me a bitter, childless woman who couldn't stand to see others happy, he finally cut contact with her completely. I'm sorry, he told me one evening about a month after she'd moved out. I should have seen what was happening. I should have protected you from my family instead of expecting you to just take it. We both learned something important, I said. Being family doesn't give someone the right to abuse your kindness. The best part of the whole situation came about 6 weeks later, when I got a call from our credit card company. Apparently, Tiffany had tried to apply for a new card using my personal information, but because I'd put fraud alerts on all our accounts, the application was flagged immediately. I had a choice. I could press charges, or I could let it slide. For about 30 seconds, I considered taking the high road and just blocking the application. Then I remembered her social media posts calling me bitter and controlling. I remembered her parents driving 1,200 miles to ambush me in my own home. I remembered 2 years of lies, manipulation, and financial abuse. I pressed charges. The legal process was surprisingly straightforward. Credit card fraud is a serious crime, and Tiffany had left a clear paper trail of her activities. She ended up pleading guilty to avoid jail time, but she had to pay restitution for all the unauthorized charges plus fees and court costs. More importantly, she now has a criminal record that will follow her for years. Good luck explaining that to potential employers or landlords. Mark's parents were outraged, of course. They accused me of being vindictive and destroying their daughter's future out of spite. But Mark supported my decision completely. She did this to herself, he told his mother during one particularly heated phone call. Madison gave her every opportunity to make this right, and instead of apologizing, Tiffany doubled down and tried to steal from us again. This is the consequence of her choices. 6 months later, our lives had completely transformed. Without the constant financial drain of supporting Tiffany, we were able to start saving for a house. Without the emotional manipulation and family drama, our relationship grew stronger. And without the stress of walking on eggshells around someone who was actively taking advantage of us, I felt like myself again. The house was peaceful. Our bank account was recovering. And for the first time in years, I wasn't dreading family gatherings or unexpected phone calls from in-laws. I ran into one of Tiffany's former friends at the grocery store recently, and she told me something that made me smile. Apparently, Tiffany had moved back in with her parents and was working at a fast food restaurant to pay off her legal fees. She'd also had to sell most of her designer clothes and accessories to help cover the restitution payments. She keeps complaining about how unfair it all is, the friend said, shaking her head. She honestly doesn't understand why everyone isn't supporting her through this difficult time. Some people never learn. But that's not my problem anymore. These days when people ask me about family obligations and supporting loved ones, I tell them this: generosity should never be confused with enabling. Love doesn't mean accepting abuse, and sometimes, the kindest thing you can do for someone is to let them face the consequences of their actions. I learned that I don't have to set myself on fire to keep other people warm. I learned that boundaries aren't selfish, they're necessary, and I learned that the people who truly love you will respect your limits, not spend months trying to tear them down. The best part is that Mark and I are closer than ever. Removing the toxic influence of his sister from our daily lives gave us space to remember why we fell in love in the first place. We're planning to buy our dream house next year, and we're talking about starting a family of our own. A family where love doesn't come with a price tag, where respect goes both ways, and where no one has to buy their way into belonging. Tiffany taught me one valuable lesson. Sometimes the most important word you can learn to say is no, and sometimes the people who react worst to that word are exactly the people who needed to hear it most. I sleep better now, knowing that our home belongs to us again, that our money is ours to spend on our own goals and dreams, that our future is ours to build without someone else's hands constantly reaching into our pockets. And if that makes me heartless or controlling or bitter, then I'll wear those labels proudly, because I'd rather be called names than be taken advantage of ever again. The woman who used to say yes to everything, who used to prioritize everyone else's comfort over her own well-being, who used to believe that love meant never setting boundaries, she's gone. In her place is someone who knows her worth, protects her peace, and refuses to be anyone's ATM ever again. And honestly, I've never been happier.